Hello and welcome back to Dark Tower YouTube, where we're doing a deep psychological dive into the magic, the mystery, and the metaphysics of Stephen King's magnum opus, The Dark Tower. My name is Michelle McEwen. I am your host, and I'm very glad to be back with you here today as we start book number 2, The Drawing of the Three. So you've finished The Gunslinger, you watched the little Gunslinger Roundup where we reconsidered Roland's big problems and what he needs to do, or maybe needs to do, to move forward in this story. And so here we are. And in today's episode, we're going to be astounded as our gunslinger loses the use of his right hand. We're going to meet a new character, Mr. Eddie Dean, and move with Roland into his consciousness full on, being John Malkovich style. We're also going to laugh a lot, which is wonderful after leaving the gunslinger. This is going to cover the prologue and chapters 1, 2, and 3 of The Prisoner. Buckle up. I've got a lot to say about these things. At the start of the prologue, we are less than 7 hours after the end of The Gunslinger, and Stephen King tells us this directly in his argument at the beginning of the book. So that's where that very specific time frame comes in. So Roland dropped Jake, met with the man in black, slept for a year, 10, 100, not sure, but he has gray hair now, and then got up and walked his butt down to the beach, as one does. Fell asleep at the shoreline and now is dreaming. This book opens with a dream, and that is of note. This dream is pretty bad. It feels awful, and it's very real to us and to Roland. King writes, "But this was no nightmare. It was a good dream. It was good because he was the one drowning, and that meant he was not Roland at all, but Jake. And he found this a relief, because it would be far better to drown as Jake than to live as himself. A man who had, for a cold dream, betrayed a child who had trusted him. Good. All right, I'll drown," he thought, listening to the roar of the sea. Let me drown. Oh, Roland. So we're mad at Roland. I'm not, because I'm just totally in love with him and he can never do wrong. But if this is your first journey to the tower, you're mad at Roland because of what he did. But perhaps opening up the book like this, seeing Roland in a state of complete psychological torture, and he'd rather be dead. So this is his dream, his subconscious mind. He knows he fucked up and he feels awful about it, as bad as anybody could feel about it. Does this help you at all? Love him a little bit more, have some empathy for him? Well, it's gonna get worse, as we know, and he will get his just desserts. But this is a very real experience for Roland, for us within Roland's consciousness, and chapter 1 is also going to open up with a dream. This is not an accident. By the end of our reading, we are firmly moving around in a conscious space. And that's crazy. It is being John Malkovich, and it's insane. And you can't just do that. There has to be some kind of like build up to that so that we can feel like, yes, this is a normal, natural thing to happen in this story. And I feel like King is doing that by setting us up with opening with a dream. And then immediately after that dream, we're in Roland's thoughts. He wakes up and we see what he's thinking. And then in the next chapter, again, opening with a dream, and then the man in black is talking to Roland in his mind, and Roland is talking back to him, and all of this is kind of leading up to that physical, metaphysical leap into Eddie Dean's consciousness. So I feel like it's a good kind of slow roll up to that point. But this is getting ahead of ourselves, but wow. Back to Roland on the beach. He realizes that this is not the ocean, or not a dream ocean, but a real ocean. And oh my God, my guns is all he can think about. And so he's kind of scrambling away, but he does see the horror to his right. He sees it, and King tells us that he sees it, but he disregards it in favor of thinking of those guns. Remember, back in The Gunslinger, at the very beginning of that book, he was questioning the value of his guns. Surely the guns were more important than his friends. Surely the guns are more important than that horn long ago lost at Jericho Hill. Surely, right guys, right? And he doesn't like that question, but he's having it. And here he decided that the guns were more important than his friends. He dropped Jake in favor of the guns, the tower, the man in black. And now he's having that experience of guns are most important. So he ignores the lobster, and this is to his great detriment. We'll get there. I have some things that I want to talk through. The lobsters. Amazing that we get a monster on page 3. It's a great monster. This is Stephen King world. The lobster capital of the world is Maine. And we know that Stephen King has spent some time looking at lobsters and thinking about lobsters, dreaming nightmares about lobsters, probably. And this came out of the mind of our author, so pretty cool. These monsters talk. They're asking desperate questions in an alien tongue. And they say things like, did a chick? Dada chum? Dada chick? What's going on here? We could just say, that's funny and weird monster stuff. Cool. But we're doing a deep psychological dive here on Dark Tower YouTube, so let's do it. What could this mean in relation to the psychological, metaphysical landscape we've been traversing? Well, let's remember Roland in The Gunslinger asking himself lots of questions, and they were desperate questions, and they were foreign to him. Alien tongue, foreign to him. He didn't know where they were coming from. He didn't like them. We're told over and over again, this is not like him to have these questions. And they became more and more desperate as that story went on. And after he dropped Jake, even more desperate. So much so that he wants to rather be dead now. So that tracks for me. The other interesting little tie-in is the sing-songy weirdness of this language. Dada check, dada chum, dida chi. Chusset, chisset, chasset. What do you think? We remember that nursery rhyme in book 1 that he was thinking about his mother singing as a child. So this has that childlike, whimsical, but Stephen King scary whimsical feeling of nursery rhyme. A horrible, horrible nursery rhyme would have creatures like this. So all of those things I think are kind of fitting for a mirror of Roland's psychological state. So just like in The Gunslinger, he was having these monstrous thoughts of hurting Jake, of killing Jake. And then we saw the slow mutants kind of manifest in a direct reflection of that, trying to hurt Jake, trying to kill Jake. And here I feel like this could be a very similar thing, where Roland's desperate state of consciousness questions, thinking about these nursery rhymes, and having this desire to drown, to be punished, to be dead. All of that perfectly encapsulated in the lobstrosity, which gets the better of him. And before we even know what's happening, takes the 2 fingers off of his right hand. It's a jaw-dropping, speechless moment on page 3 of this book. And did you say, wait, what? And had to go back and reread it? And then you get to the part where you know it's real, and you think, but wait, no, we can save those fingers. We can put them back on. We can take them and put them on ice and go to the hospital, or they'll grow back, surely. Surely he didn't just lose the use of his right hand. Surely that creature didn't just eat his fingers. But it did. And Roland, by the time he realizes it, is almost about to get killed. It takes his part of his toe, his calf, and almost kills him before he can get this rock and kind of smash the thing. Whew. This is amazing. It's raining and thundering here. That's what's going on, if you're wondering. Good setting for a Stephen King spooky wet beach story. So the thing is going to kill him, but he kills it. It doesn't kill him, but he's hurt. He's very hurt. We're shocked, stunned. So is he. This is permanent. What does this look like moving forward? Now we have a gunslinger that can't use his right hand or his right gun. That's a serious problem. And that reminds me that I want to kind of walk through a few things here. Okay? So we get that, oh my God moment where we realize we're in a different book now and we like it. We like it. Are you all in when you read this part? You can't put the book down now. Was that different than what happened in The Gunslinger? Curious to hear your thoughts on that. Next, we have Roland putting the guns above all else, which we've kind of talked about already. But that's another thing we're kind of thinking about, that this is a good example of him not choosing love, not choosing himself, but choosing the guns over everything else. And then I want you to think about, what would this have looked like had Jake been there? He's not, so we'll never know. But just think for a moment. If he had decided to save Jake, picks him up, Man in Black said, I'm leaving if you save that kid. Bye. He didn't do much for us. He told Roland stuff that Roland already knew. He gave him that big, amazing metaphysical explanation of the universe, but for what? It doesn't really help much in the scope of what's going on in the story, really. It's cool as fuck, okay, but you know what I'm saying. Roland has Jake now, not the Man in Black, but so what? Roland and Jake are going to the beach. They're going to the beach after what just happened to them. No doubt in my mind. That's where they're headed. They know where to go. And then they keep watch. They don't just fall asleep on the shoreline. No way. One's keeping watch and notices those things coming out of the waves and says, hey, what do you think about this? And then this never happens. Now, there's also no need for that psychological torture turning into physiological torture and punishment. That doesn't have to happen if he saved Jake. But none of this would have happened anyway. It wouldn't have happened. He would have had his hands. He would have had this amazing kid. Would have been great, but no, that's not what went on. And then, did anybody laugh during this scene? I do. I love this scene, and I always laugh at this part. King writes, his mangled right foot was still too numb to hurt, but his right hand was a bellowing fire. The ghosts of his talented and long-trained fingers, which were already decomposing in the digestive juices of that thing's guts, screamed that they were still there, that they were burning. I see serious problems ahead, the gunslinger thought remotely. Yeah, no shit. Yes, it's so darkly funny. And then that's what he's thinking. Oh, fuck, I always laugh at that part. He thinks it again later, which is also funny, but not as funny as this first time. The other funny thing about this part is that while this awful, dramatic, jaw-dropping thing is happening, you have this creature saying, "Dumma-chum?" It's absurd, dark, funny horror. It's great. It's great. I love it. I'm in 100%. Okay, so where do we leave Roland at the end of all of this? King writes, Gunslinger retreated a step at a time, retreated until he reached the grassy edge of the shingle. There he sat down and did all he knew to do. He sprinkled the stumps of fingers and toe with the last of his tobacco to stop the bleeding. Sprinkled it thick, in spite of new stinging. His missing great toe had joined the chorus. And then he only sat, sweating in the chill, wondering about infection, wondering how he would make his way in this world with 2 fingers on his right hand gone. When it came to the guns, both hands had been equal, but in all other things his right hand had ruled. Wondering if the thing had some poison in its bite which might already be working its way into him. Wondering if morning would ever come. Wondering. Did a chick? Dad a chum? There's those desperate questions. What do you think? So, we're going to move into chapter 1, the door. And Roland is in dire straits, much like we found him at the start of the gunslinger. There are a lot of parallels here. I'm wondering if you picked up on it. Tell me in the comments if you were like, aha, this is very similar to the opening of that first book. But chapter 1 starts with a dream, like I mentioned. And this is another tarot card dream. We're dreaming of the man in black, showing him the prisoner card. Now this does a few things. If you didn't read The Gunslinger and jumped into book 2, or you tried to read The Gunslinger but didn't make it to that tarot reading, and you're like, I'm going to keep trying, which is what I advise you to do if you had a hard time with The Gunslinger. This catches you up a little bit. We need this to sew things together and to tell us and to tell Roland, hey, this person is probably going to show up soon. So it ties everything together nicely. This dream state, though, is the second one we're getting very quickly in this book. And I just want to remember what we heard about Kef. Remember that back in The Gunslinger? Where Kef was this sharing of water, sharing of life force, telepathy. It was a lot of things. It was like, I feel like the dark matter of the universe. It's kind of everything is how it's defined in the Stephen King verse. Also defined as Kef implies the knowledge a person gains from dream life, as well as his or her life force. So big ideas there. We know that Stephen King dreams a lot. We have Roland dreaming a lot in The Gunslinger and now in this book. So we're just remembering that these are important and they're there for a reason. And sometimes it's just to kind of further the plot along, and then sometimes it's to clue us in on something that's happened or that's coming, or all of the above. We find Roland going through his ammunition, and he's sorting out the shells that got wet, that probably aren't going to fire, but we're not sure. And then we have a pile that like maybe just got damp, not sure, but maybe some of them are going to fire. And it's fantastic writing, because not only do we have a gunslinger now who can't use his right hand or his right gun, we have shells that might not work. And this is not a spoiler, but in a book about a gunslinger, in a series about a gunslinger, for sure, we're going to get another gun battle. And now we have already set up this fantastic irony around, dramatic irony around, what is this going to look like? This is not a good way to move forward. Talking about Roland moving into that new car at the end of The Gunslinger, pulling himself up into the light of a new car. Well, we kind of wondered, is this going to be a good one? It's not good. It's not going so great so far. It's not a great start to things for Roland. He is in pain. He is very tired. He is out of food. He's running out of water. He's got an infection. He can see the blood poisoning happening. He sleeps for a long time. And when he wakes up, he's like, oh boy, like I really am sick. This is bad. And King writes, I need medicine, he thought, but there is no medicine here. Had he come this far just to die then? He would not. And if he were to die, In spite of his determination, he would die on his way to the tower. "How remarkable you are, gunslinger," the man in black tittered inside his head. "How indomitable, how romantic in your stupid obsession." "Fuck you," he croaked and drank. So funny, we got more humor there. That's funny. Also, just noting that Man in Black has started to speak to him directly. So he has thought of the Man in Black and was dreaming of the Man in Black, but now we have the voice of the Man in Black loud and clear in his head. So that psychological torture continues. That's his main nemesis. Imagine. And I think some of us are like, oh yeah, when you have the voice of the person you dislike the most piping up in your consciousness. That sucks. It's the worst thing. And the more you try and not listen to that or hear that, the more it's happening. Do y'all hear these voices? I thought everybody did, because I do. And I hear my voice, and I hear other people's voices, and I hear my arch nemesis voice. But I just learned in the last few years that some people don't experience it like that. I can't say like they're not having anything happening, because then you're brain dead. Like, you're obviously conscious, which means you're aware of something. So I'm so fascinated by my friends who share that experience of, I don't have an internal dialogue, I don't have an internal monologue. So I'm curious what my people out there, my Dark Tower people, are thinking. Anyway, if you're somebody that does hear voices, you know it's bad when it's the bad person in your life and you can't shut them up. And you do say, fuck off, fuck you, to that voice. So we can super empathize with Roland in that moment. All right, so Roland is trying to pull himself together the best he can in his awful state, and he is going to move north up the beach. Why north? Because his intuition tells him that. And he trusts that instinct, that intuition, except when it would really help him, as we saw in the last book. But this is where we're like, okay, this is very much like the Gunslinger. And I mean, yeah, very much like the walk in the Gunslinger, where right before he gets to the way station is when this is happening, where he's crossing the sand. He's very, he's not sick, he's dying out of hunger, thirst, exposure. So same thing here. We're on the sand, this endless, never-ending trek across the sand. No food, no water, dying of infection. You know, he's sick this time, so that's a little bit different, but just a very similar scene that is being painted here. Did you catch all of the threes that were coming up in this segment? I'm going to point them out to you in case you didn't, but that was just delightful, because we're in the drawing of the three, and this is a theme in this book, and we're just hammered. It's hammered into us by King here. So he walked for 3 hours, we're told. And it's about that time that he falls down for the third time. And it's after the third time that he falls that he's seeing something in the distance, which, before I get onto the threes, is also like the Gunslinger. Remember, he fell and we had that bleeding, that blood that dripped into the ground. And then he saw the way station. And here we have, he fell. The blood sacrifice has already happened. His fingers were cut, and we're told about the blood pouring out of his body at the beginning of the prologue. So that blood sacrifice happened. Also, he has sacrificed Jake at this point. I don't think he needed to do that to get to this door, to have it appear, but who knows? But anyway, sacrifice and then salvation is a similar thing, perhaps, that's going on here. But back to the threes. So he falls for the third time. And then does he see something in the distance? King writes, "He raised his head like a groggy fighter, and some distance ahead, perhaps a mile, perhaps 3. It was difficult to judge distances along the unchanging reach of the strand, where with the fever working inside him, making his eyeballs pulse in and out. He saw something new, something which stood upright on the beach. What was it? 3. Didn't matter. 3 is the number of your fate." So this turns out to be the door, and he reaches it crawling on hands and knees. Surprise, surprise, somewhere around 3 o'clock. It's just fantastic. And if you were missing it, this is where you got clued in. When he's looking ahead, perhaps a mile, perhaps 3. No, that snags your brain because we don't think like that. You don't say a mile or 3, you say a mile or 2. But when you have 3 as the number of your fate kind of pulsing in your fever-ridden brain, everything is in threes. How does he know it was 3 hours, 3 o'clock, like third time? I mean, so anyway, King is just, I think, having a lot of fun with the theme right there. And we have just so many parallels between those two scenes that I feel like we have to start connecting Eddie and Jake. And the dreams, beginning of the prologue, that dream was about Jake. Beginning of this chapter, dream is about Eddie. So there's another tie-in, but we're saying, aha, like we got to Jake through this exact sequence of events. Not exact, but parallel sequence of events. And Jake had come through that door of death. And here we have a new door, which says the prisoner on it. So this is going to be Eddie Dean. It's going to be the prisoner. So, okay, where are we? So Roland kind of gets to the door on hands and knees, and it's a magic door, of course. King spends a long time considering this door. Roland considering this door, and he's very sick and he's dying, but he gets up and he's kind of like walking to one side of it and then the other, and it disappears, and he's doing all of this. And why does he do that? Because this is magic. Imagine you're in Roland's shoes and you're out in nature and there's just a door standing there out of nowhere, attached to nothing. You would do the same thing. So I feel like there's just a lot of humanness in Roland in this moment that we can connect up to. And King's just saying, like, this is incredible. This is whimsical, magical. Wow, let's take a minute and just reflect on how crazy this is. Instead of just being like, and there was a door and Roland opened it. That's what makes King so wonderful. That's what connects us and endears us to his characters specifically in his writing, I think. I mean, there's lots of reasons, but that's one of them, and I think that's a good example right there. The door, of course, is a magic door. We know it's going to go somewhere, but this is confirmation of our idea about magical doors in the Gunslinger, where Jake did come through the door of death to put him into the way station, and we had the man in black mentioning kind of moving between worlds, but not mentioning doors specifically, but we had to guess that there must be other magical doors. And what do those look like? Is it death? Because it doesn't seem like he's dying every time. We really couldn't tell anything. But here is kind of a confirmation that, like, yes, there are other doors. Yes, this is a magical door that's going to transport us between worlds. And this is what this one looks like. Is that it? Are there going to be other kinds of portals, magical doors in this series? We'll find out, but it's really fun. A magical door is always fun, isn't it? So he is like, well, I mean, it's here. It's crazy, but like, what am I going to do? This is my door. I have to open this door. It's for me. And we're told that as he opens the door, he freezes and utters the first scream of terror in his adult life, and then slams it shut. And that's the end of that little section, which again is just a heart-stopping, jaw-dropping moment where we're like, wow, what did he see? And you have to keep going. This book is just, you should be all in at this point. And once again, so different from the Gunslinger, and seeing Roland in a totally different place and space, and the first scream of terror. This is the scariest thing that he's ever seen in his life, adult life. That's big. So what was it? Well, of course it was looking out the window of a plane down onto the earth, which Roland would have no idea what that was about. But a funny thing is that he had heard about this because that nursery rhyme that his mother used to sing to him that was stuck in his head in The Gunslinger, the rain in Spain falls on the plain, but then King wrote the rest of that ended with, and the plains in Spain fall in the rain. And we're told Roland didn't know what a plane was in the context of that last stanza of the nursery rhyme. He does now. He does now. He's about to have that full-on experience. So I don't know if that's intentional, but it's super fun if we remember that happened. He thinks of it as a sky carriage, so I don't know if Roland made that connection, but we do. And he makes that connection because Court is now speaking to him in his mind. So we have Court's voice now in Roland's psyche saying the gunslingery stuff, like remember to look harder and you see what you didn't see, and all of this great thinking, observing kind of skill training that Roland went through. And so he's like, it was a window. But when he opens the door again, the view has changed. And now he's looking around the sky carriage. And I think he remembers that he had heard of such things. Actually, now that I think about it, had never experienced this, but perhaps there were tales of these kinds of things. So he's in the sky carriage. And this part I want to read to you, not because it has much to do with magic, mystery, metaphysics, or the story itself, but because I love it and it's stuck with me forever, and it will for the rest of my life. So Roland is like looking around on the plain. He's observing what the trusting sheep are doing. And King writes, some read papers covered with tiny words broken here and there with pictures, while others wrote on papers with pens of a sort the gunslinger had never seen. But the pens mattered little to him. It was the paper. He lived in a world where paper and gold were valued at rough equivalency. He had never seen so much paper in his life. Even now, one of the men tore a sheet from the yellow pad which lay upon his lap and crumpled it into a ball. Although he had only written on the top half of one side and not at all on the other. The gunslinger was not too sick to feel a twinge of horror and outrage at such unnatural profligacy. So this has stuck with me, and I just see it the way that Roland sees it now. And I go into the office especially, and there's just paper everywhere. It's everywhere, and it's let people leave it on the printer. They didn't even bother to pick up whatever, or they printed it and there was a little typo, so they print the whole thing over again. And then it's used maybe once, hand out things at a meeting, nobody even looks at it, into the shredder, into the garbage can. It's everywhere, and it's so wasteful. And I'm just always like, no, what are you doing? Like, stop it. Roland hates you. Roland hates you. I had a teacher in 10th grade, 10th grade religion class, and he would make us write double in the college-lined ruled notebooks. We had to write 2 lines in there so that we wouldn't waste any paper. But I was always just like, he read The Gunslinger. He's a Dark Tower fan. He's my people. He gets it. So neither here nor there really, but now you know, and now maybe you're going to pay more attention to the wasting of paper in our world. And what if we end up in Roland's world? We're going to be sorry that we didn't try harder. Okay, so he's looking at all of this, and he figures out, Roland is so smart. So he's messed up and we're mad at him, but he is operating under very stressful conditions, and his mind is as sharp as ever, and he realizes that he's looking through eyes. That's what this is about. And of course, it's the eyes of the prisoner. Chapter 2 is called Eddie Dean, so we're like, okay, the prisoner is Eddie Dean, but notice how Roland doesn't get his name for quite some time. I don't even think he gets it by the end of this week's reading. So remember, we didn't get Roland's name in the Gunslinger. For many pages, we were introduced to Roland, but we didn't have his name until Allie was getting shot. So, similarities here and there. All right, but Roland is like, well, this is the prisoner. So he's calling him the prisoner, which adds to some of the comic genius of this book. All right, so we have Roland on the beach looking into this door, figuring out these are the eyes of a human being in a sky carriage far above the world. What's he going to do? And this is one of my favorite sentences in this book, maybe in the series. King writes, without thought, with the simple resolve that had made him the last of them all, the last to continue marching on and on, long after Cuthbert and the others had died or given up, committed suicide or treachery, or simply recanted the whole idea of the tower. With the single-mindedness and incurious resolve that had driven him across the desert, and all the years before the desert in the wake of the man in black, the gunslinger stepped through the doorway. Oh my God, he's going through the door. Holy moly. And it just gives me chills every time I read it. It's so wonderful. Now that single-mindedness, we've said, is getting Roland into trouble. It is. No doubt about it. But yet, there's flip sides to a coin. People are complex. There's multiple things happening. We contain multitudes. And so this single-mindedness is helping him move forward into what is his ka right now, is his destiny, for better or worse. He's doing it. And it makes for a great story. But also we appreciate that aspect of Roland in some ways. Okay, we're taking a huge metaphysical leap here in this story, moving with Roland into the consciousness of Eddie Dean. And when we meet Eddie, the first thing that's happening is that we realize that he's having his own internal conversation with his brother, Henry. So he's hearing the voice of his brother, Henry. We learn that he's smuggling a pound of cocaine into JFK from the Bahamas. And he's feeling queasy. So the gunslinger walks through the door, enters his mind, and Eddie feels something. He feels this as a physical sensation of queasiness. Now, he's a heroin addict. We learn that about him as well. And he is going cold turkey, which we'll talk about in a second. But he's not taking as much of the drug as he would like to take, and therefore feeling like, I feel queasy because I'm about to vomit because this is withdrawal. And that makes sense. We can empathize with him there. That makes a lot of sense. But let's talk about the cold turkey thing. So we're in his mind. He is like, I feel sick. I gotta go to the bathroom. I'm gonna vomit. So he goes into the bathroom, shuts the door, and he's like, pull yourself together, looking in the mirror and having this memory of a conversation with Henry about going cold turkey. And King writes, and this is Eddie remembering what Henry said. Everybody talks about going cold turkey, Henry had said. But before you get there, you gotta go cool turkey. And Eddie, stoned out of his mind, had cackled madly because he knew exactly what Henry was talking about. Henry, however, had not so much as cracked a smile. In some ways, cool turkey's worse than cold turkey, Henry said. At least when you make it cold turkey, you know you're going to puke. You know you're going to shake. You know you're going to sweat until you feel like you're drowning in it. Cool turkey is like the curse of expectation. So cool turkey, which Eddie is thinking about a lot, is a great plot device here because the curse of expectation is fantastic tension building and helps us as we're looking at what Eddie's going through here and how he's making sense of everything. The idea that he's having this curse of expectation and not quite off of the drug, but mostly off it to try and function. It works really well as part of the story here. And then Eddie asks Henry, what do you call it when a needle freak gets a hot shot? And Henry surprises both of them into fits of laughter by promptly replying, you call that baked turkey. And they think that's very funny. And it's funny. It's funny. So they're laughing and there's this humorous bit, but things are not quite so funny now to Eddie, as he's feeling queasy in the bathroom, smuggling drugs and just wanting a fix, but knowing he can't really do that. And so he starts talking to himself. And here we get one of the best ever run-on sentences in the history of writing. Yes, it's this stream of consciousness sentence that spans the entire page of the book. And I'm going to read it all because it's magnificent. It's so good. It's so funny. It's so wonderful. It's giving us an entirely different voice than anything we've heard so far. It's putting us squarely into this character. It's moving us squarely into this book. It's perfect. It's so good. Are you ready? King writes, and this is Eddie talking to his brother inside of his own mind. Hey, Henry. Oh, great sage and eminent junkie big brother. While we're on the subject of our feathered friends, you want to know my definition of cooked goose? That's when the customs guy at Kennedy decides there's something a little funny about the way you look. Or it's one of the days when they got the dogs with the PhD noses out there instead of at Port Authority, and they all start to bark and pee all over the floor, and it's you. They're all just about strangling themselves on their choke chains trying to get to. And after the customs guys toss all your luggage, they take you into the little room and ask you if you'd mind taking off your shirt. And you say, yeah, I sure would. I'd mind like hell. I picked up a little cold down in the Bahamas, and the air conditioning in here is real high, and I'm afraid it might turn into pneumonia. And they say, oh, is that so? Do you always sweat like that when the air conditioning is too high, Mr. Dean? You do? Well, excuse us all to hell. Now do it. And you do it. And they say, maybe you better take off the t-shirt too, because you look like maybe you got some kind of a medical problem, buddy. Those bulges under your pits look like maybe they could be some kind of lymphatic tumors or something, and you don't even bother to say anything else. It's like a center fielder who doesn't even bother to chase the ball when it's hit a certain way. He just turns around and watches it go into the upper deck, because when it's gone, it's gone. So you take off the t-shirt and, hey, looky here, you're some lucky kid. Those aren't tumors. Unless they're what you might call tumors on the corpus of society. Yuck, yuck, yuck. Those things look more like a couple of baggies held there with scotch strapping tape. And by the way, don't worry about that smell, son. That's just goose. It's cooked. I love it. I love it so much. It's wonderful, and it makes me love Eddie. He's a junkie, he's doing a bad thing, I guess, but like, I love him and I want more of him and more of this. Different energy, high energy, frenetic, funny. We love Eddie Dean right off the bat. So Eddie's looking into the mirror and he's getting a feeling of being watched, and he notices his eyes change color from his hazel green to the gunslinger's blue. And that freaks him out, rightly. And he's like, oh, I'm going to be sick. So he's about to vomit. King writes, in the half second before he did, and the half second he went on looking into the mirror, he saw those blue eyes disappear. But before that happened, there was suddenly the feeling of being two people, of being possessed, like that little girl in The Exorcist. Clearly, he felt a new mind inside his own mind and heard a thought, not as his own thought, but more like the voice from a radio. I've come through. I'm in the sky carriage. And then King shifts us back into Roland's perspective and writes, "I've come through. I'm in the sky carriage," the gunslinger thought, and a second later, "He sees me in the mirror." Roland pulled back, did not leave, but pulled back, like a child retreating to the furthest corner of a very long room. He was inside the sky carriage. He was also inside a man who was not himself, inside the prisoner. In that first moment, when he had been close to the front, it was the only way he could describe it. He had been more than inside. He had almost been the man. He felt the man's illness, whatever it was, and sensed the man was about to retch. Roland understood that if he needed to, he could take control of this man's body. He would suffer his pains, would be ridden by whatever demon, ape rode him. But if he needed to, he could. So this goes on, but I read a little bit of that because I need everybody just to pause. Because King is brilliant, and he has to set up how he's going to tell a story with one character living inside of the other character's mind. Just imagine someone gave you that task to do. You have to write a story with two characters, but one of them is living inside of the other character's mind, and you have to make it very clear who is thinking what, who is doing what, who is feeling what, how they're communicating with each other and with people around them. That is crazy. That's a crazy homework assignment in your writing class, and it would be difficult for most of us to do this. King does it so smoothly and effortlessly that we just buy it. We don't even think about how magnificent this is, how crazy a concept it is. We don't get this one a lot. Someone living inside of another person's psyche. At least not in writing. I mean, I guess, sure, The Exorcist, but you know what I mean. This is not a common concept in literature. And it is literature. Oh, yes, it is. And those people that just dismiss Stephen King and take him for granted, and he's a horror writer. He's not a real writer, just because there happens to be a scary clown in the book or something like that. I just give you Exhibit A. This is magnificent. And in the space of 2 or 3 paragraphs, he completely, perfectly sets up the metaphysical rules for the rest of the story, or for the rest of this part of the story anyway. And it is perfect. You go, oh yeah, got it, great. But he's talking about moving inside of metaphysical spaces, moving to the front, pulling back, but not exiting, in the very long room. Like, this is someone's consciousness, guys. So I'm just trying to say, like, this is huge. It's a huge idea, and it's executed perfectly. And Stephen King is brilliant. He's a brilliant writer, and I just want to stop and applaud him right now for the way that he wrote the setup here, and then the execution for the rest of this and the next chapter, which are so wonderful and full of tension, growing tension, and dramatic irony, and humor, and just love for these characters. So, you know I love the story, but I really, really love it. Okay, so let's get back to, where are we? Okay, so Roland is moving all the way to the front of Eddie, and he needs to completely take over for a minute so that he can see, number one, that the door is still there, because that's important. Number two, what happened to his body when he stepped through the door. And so he figures out, yes, the door is there, and his body is just a shell. His soul, like, he's still alive, his consciousness, and this is where we're getting that idea of Ka. We're going to get a different definition for that in a second. But he's alive, and he's like, I better move my body because the lobsters are just going to eat it if I leave it there. So that's figured out. And then we learn that Eddie completely blacks out. So when Roland comes all the way forward in this metaphysical space and takes over, Eddie Dean is gone. And he comes back, but it's just a complete blackout. So that's scary. So, and especially given, if that would just be scary anyway, but given the state of his life in this moment, it's even more scary for him that this is happening. So he kind of checks out. He's getting very sleepy. He's going to take a nap. And while he's sleeping, he's thinking of, Roland is actually watching the events that have happened like a movie. So I don't know if Eddie's dreaming or Roland is just accessing his mind, which is happening later in this chapter. But we all get to see the background of the drug smuggling story. And it's great. But the two things we're going to pull out of that is, number one, Eddie is very much addicted to heroin. It's a big problem. It's a big weakness. And number two, despite that weakness, he's a gunslinger. There is a deep steel in him that you do not mess with this man. And he knows how to show up and get the job done, even though he has this big monkey on his back. He is a prisoner of heroin. So we see that. Roland sees that and notes that. And that's good for everybody to know moving forward, and we're going to see a great example of that by the end of this week's reading. Okay, what else is going on? Geez, there's so much in these chapters that we have to talk a lot about the story and plot so that we know what's happening. Roland also points out that Eddie, as he's learning about the prisoner, he's like, he doesn't know his name yet, but this reminds him so much of Cuthbert. Achingly of his friend that we heard about in this book, we heard about in the last book, and now we have this man showing up, and Roland's like, he's so much like my friend that died. So marking that. Roland knows that his body back on the beach is dying. He hasn't eaten anything. He's got to get himself some food. So he's going to test the metaphysical magic of the door. How does this work? Can he bring food from this side back to himself? And so this is where we get the Tooter fish popkin scene, which is delightfully funny. And he can get this Tooter fish popkin back to himself. So he's holding it and he goes through the door mentally, leaves Eddie's body and goes back into his own. The sandwich disappears. Nobody sees it disappear, thank God, and on the other side it materializes and immediately drops into the sand because he doesn't have those fingers on his hand. But it gets sandy, he doesn't care. As it turns out, Roland has no idea what a Tooter fish is, but it's delicious and he loves it. So, and his body feels a little bit stronger having eaten something. But the Tooter fish popkin thing is like an alarm bell. He doesn't say Tooter fish, he says popkin when he wants a sandwich. And the flight attendant is like, what? And then Roland does that trick where he's rifling through Eddie's mind and says, sandwich. She's like, yeah, okay. And then he says, thank ye, Sai, when she brings it. And again, she's like, what? It's sleep talk. But now her air hostess, stewardess mind has been turned on, switched on, because thank ye, Sai. She's like, is this a foreign language? Is this a terrorist? Terrorist. That's the man in black. A terrorist might say, thank you, Sai, she thinks. And now we move into her mind. Jane Dorning, I think her name is, but Jane, just this like plain Jane character that I don't think we're gonna have much to do with her for the rest of the story, but we're gonna live with her for a few moments. And again, what King does so well is just get us fully empathic with the character. What are they thinking? What are they feeling? Why? And we can relate to that. So we go into her perspective, and she too has another voice in her head. So there's a theme here, guys. But she's thinking of her teacher. And this reminds me so much of Roland having Court talking to him in his head. She has her teacher talking to her in her head. And it's very gunslingery kind of training. So when Court was like, look again, pay attention, that's exactly what her teacher was saying to her. Pay attention. Here's how you can figure out what's happening. So that's what's going on with her. And when she notices his eyes are changing back and forth, so when Roland's coming forward, his eyes are blue, Eddie's eyes are blue, and then when he's pulling backwards, they're hazel, and she's noticing this too. And now she's trying to explain all of this away, but it's too much. It's too much. And she's kind of like, something is wrong here. And she's another gunslinger, right? And so as the plane's getting ready to land, so now we have a time crunch, which is fantastic. She's starting to devise a plan to take Eddie out. She's like, he's a terrorist. I'm not letting that happen. And Roland knows that she knows. So Roland is watching through Eddie and being like, she's onto us. Eddie has no idea what's going on. And Eddie's starting to lose his shit because he keeps blacking out. It's so good. It's so good. More comic gold as we're trying to further the plot along, because Roland's trying to figure out what is happening here. Remember, Roland is just like stepping into the situation and having to look around and assess and figure out, like, okay, I'm in the prisoner, but like, so what? What am I supposed to do with this man? What is happening here? I need medicine. Can he get it for me? Like, so remember how lost Roland is. We forget that because he's so good at jumping so quickly into the situation and just acting upon his instincts, as we're told. But this part is very funny, where he's trying to deduce what happens when Eddie gets off of the plane. King writes, "He must clear the customs," the gunslinger thought. The answer was so large and simple, so close to him, that he very nearly did not see it at all. It was the drug the prisoner meant to smuggle in that would make clearing the customs so difficult. There might be some sort of oracle who might be consulted in the cases of people who seem suspicious. Otherwise, Roland gleaned, the clearing ceremony would be simplicity itself, as crossing a friendly border was in his own world. One made the sign of fealty to that kingdom's monarch, a simple token gesture, and was allowed to pass. So this is funny. And you read this book, and it changes you forever. So you're never going to look at people wasting paper the same, and you're never going to clear customs the same. Never. Most of us have been on an international flight. If you haven't and you're going to, you will have to clear customs, but you won't clear customs. You're going to go through the ceremony of clearing the customs. And you are going to have to step up and meet the oracle, who will judge if there's anything suspicious about you before letting you pass into the next kingdom. Also, Roland is so smart. So this is funny, yes, and we're loving it. And he's figuring out how things work, and he's right. He's correct in his assessment of this totally different world, foreign world to anything he's ever known. He's like, how is this like my world? That's very smart and like good Boy Scouts gunslinger kind of training. And so Roland figures out, okay, got the door. I can take things back there. Can I bring things back here? I got to figure that out, because then I can just leave the drugs there. No problem. And he does that test. He brings a coin back and forth, I think. And he's like, aha, that works. So we're getting kind of rules about the metaphysical magical door. Roland's figuring out how this works for plot development. But he forgot. He figured out how this works, what he's going to do, but he forgot that Eddie has to know what's going on, because if you try to let Eddie clear customs without the drugs, Eddie's going to lose his mind. He already is losing his mind. So that's not going to work, but Roland doesn't know that yet. So that's another just mounting tension kind of thing in this time pressure situation. Meanwhile, Jane is talking to the other stewardess and letting her know something's up. We're taking this guy out. But the other woman notices Eddie bends over and she can see the cocaine, and she's like, no, he's trying to get coke into JFK. And they're like, and they breathe a sigh of relief, because they're like, we can take care of that loser, no problem. So they're acting like ha ha ha. But Roland is like, they know what's really going on. He's so good at what he does that he can sense something is really wrong, and they're going to prevent him from clearing the customs. Eddie still has no clue what's going on. And here's where we get this new context for the idea of Ka in this bit. King writes, "The gunslinger wondered how the man, whose mind had become temporary home for the gunslinger's own Ka, could be so stupid. Some of it was what he was putting into his body, of course, one of this world's versions of devilweed. So this idea of Ka in the last book was destiny, fate, a new path forward, a new timeline. We remember Ka being linked to ancient Egypt when we dug a little deeper and saying it was life force. It was the part of the life force of the ancient Egyptians. And here, that is a really good fit. Roland's life force inside of Eddie. Not quite the soul, or you could make it that analogy though, Ka as being the soul, life force. His life force left his body, but he's not dead. The life force that animated him is now in Eddie, the essence of who he is, his personality. And you'll remember some of that ancient Egyptian lore that we learned. Go back and review it if you would like, because it's relevant right here. It feels like a really good example of that. Okay, where are we in all of this? So Roland gets it at some point. He's like, oh my God, he has to be on board with this whole thing. I have to make contact with him. I have to tell him who I am and what's going on. Otherwise, this is not going to work. I have to talk to him right now because we're running out of time. And he talks to Eddie the way that Court talks to him inside of his mind, which is fun. Straighten up, maggot. They're suspicious enough without you looking as if you've gone crazy. Eddie he's not having a good day. Things are not good for him. He's feeling very out of sorts. And now he had that flash of the voice in his head, the radio thought in his head. And this is different. So when we were back kind of having Roland with the Man in Black's voice in his head, that was Roland though. So whenever we have the voice of my mom is talking to me and yelling at me, or my boss is scolding me, or my boyfriend is saying something really nice to me, it's me though. That's all me talking to me. I might be putting on the mask of that person's voice. You know what I mean? The sound of that person's voice is what I'm hearing, and I say, oh, that's my mom's voice. But there is no voice. It's me. It's me, from me, to me. And just like Roland, he's judging himself there. The Man in Black is like, oh, your stupid obsession. Roland knows that this is a stupid obsession. So he's like, he can't quite face up to that on his own, that this is him judging himself. So it's like, oh, the Man in Black is making fun of me. No, dude, like, that's you talking to you. The deepest part of yourself telling you that you're fucking it all up. Anyway, that's different than what is happening here, where Eddie hears that voice like a radio. We're told that's different, and he feels another mind inside of his mind. So this physical sensation, how could you make that physical? But it's different than hearing the voice of his brother. We're clearly told these are different things and how to know they're different. So when he's hearing Roland's voice, he thinks that he has the headphones on still. So again, that feeling of this is a radio playing inside of my head. But he has no other choice to listen, because Roland is like, hey, bud, the jig is up. They know what is going on and you're busted. And Eddie then can see that that is what's happening. And he's like, oh, shit. This radio in my voice is correct. And Roland's like, it's okay, I've got a plan. Go get yourself into the bathroom. People are deplaning at this point, and Eddie has no other choice really than to listen to Roland's voice. This would not have worked if King hadn't so masterfully and cleverly set up what was happening here. So imagine you have somebody else's voice in your head, but it's not like you as you. It's like a radio in your head, and it's another person kind of saying, I'm straighten up, maggot. Like, and it's a different experience. Now, if that happened to you, you would probably call 911. You probably wouldn't do the thing that the person was telling you to do. Not right away. I mean, right? You would take a minute and try to decide if you were completely bonkers and what you were going to do about that, not listening to the voice in your head. But Eddie has no other choice because of this complete situation that King has written him into a corner, so that the idea of you're not just going to do what the voice in your head says, you might if you were Eddie Dean in this particular situation with no time left at all. People are getting off the plane. He knows that they know because of Roland, was alerted to this because of that voice in his head. And then Roland's like, I can help you. It makes sense that Eddie's going to go along with this now, which is, again, Stephen King is a mastermind writer. He's brilliant, and this is all brilliant writing. And we just easily, effortlessly accept it and don't even say thank you to Stephen King because it just feels so natural to us that, of course, this is what's going to happen. But so they go into the bathroom, shut the door. Roland takes Eddie back into his world, onto the beach, and now they have to get all of the drugs off of Eddie's body and get back into the plane before they realize he's gone. So Eddie's doing a pretty good job of getting the tape off, but he does manage to accidentally nick himself with Roland's super sharp knife, and the tape is now getting higher, and he can't do it because he can't see. And we get this from King. I can finish and maybe cut myself wide open, or you can try, Eddie said. I can't see what I'm doing. My fucking chin's in the way. The gunslinger took the knife in his left hand. The hand was shaking. Watching that blade, honed to a suicidal sharpness, shaking like that, made Eddie extremely nervous. Maybe I better chance it my... Wait. The gunslinger stared fixedly at his left hand. Eddie didn't exactly disbelieve in telepathy, but he had never exactly believed in it either. Nevertheless, he felt something now. Something as real and palpable as heat baking out of an oven. After a few seconds, he realized what it was. The gathering of this strange man's will. How the hell can he be dying if I can feel the force of him that strongly? The shaking hand began to steady down. Soon, it was barely shivering. After no more than 10 seconds, it was as solid as a rock. Now, the gunslinger said. He took a step forward, raised the knife, and Eddie felt something else baking off him. Rancid fever. Are you left-handed? Eddie asked. No, the gunslinger said. Oh, Jesus, Eddie said, and decided he might feel better if he closed his eyes for a moment. More humor there. We have the dynamic between these two men, which we love and we want more of. And this very real, palpable, metaphysical moment happens. Funny, because Eddie's saying he didn't exactly disbelieve in telepathy, and yet that is exactly what is happening to him literally. So that's funny, and also telling us something about Eddie, where he's not a person that would really believe in this stuff, but he didn't exactly disbelieve in it. So that's important to know about him, maybe. But this palpable feeling of Roland's gathering will, or his life force, wouldn't you say? That's a physical experience that Eddie has with Roland on the beach. Something physical is happening there. So this is a metaphysical thing, gathering of will. How could you see that or feel that if you're not the person doing it? But Eddie does. It makes me think about, would the same thing be happening in Eddie's world? Is it just in Roland's world where he can feel this metaphysical thing happening? I don't know, but it does remind me of the idea of Ka as life force, as we were just introduced to, kind of showing up here in a very direct example of what that could look like. Right, so we're getting to the end of this chapter, the climax of this scene. It's intense. So the captain, the stewardesses are all on the other side of the bathroom door. Everyone's getting off the plane. The last few people are getting off of the plane. The captain's like losing his mind because he knows, they all know what's happening. This guy has drugs and he must be trying to get rid of them, but he can't flush it. So what the hell? Like, just leave him alone. He's not going anywhere. But the captain's like, I'm banging the door down. The captain like knows that something's a little weird. How does he know that? He has this sense that Eddie's going to get away with this, but he doesn't. How is that possible? But yet he has this feeling about it, so he's like, I'm banging the door down. As soon as the people are off this plane, this door is down. Roland and Eddie are kind of hearing, they're yelling at him through the door. You got 5 seconds to open up. All of this. Eddie now has the blood on him, but he has the coke is off. But he has this tape marks all over him. He's bleeding. Roland's like mopping off the blood, like, don't put your shirt back on, you're bleeding. And Eddie's fumbling to get the shirt on, and Roland's like, you're so stupid. It's so good. And Roland is starting to lose it a little bit. He wants to like scream at Eddie because he's panicked at the time crunch situation that they're in. Eddie is the one who carries them through this scene. And I think that's important to recognize. We saw that deep steel in him in the flashback to the Bahamas, and now his gunslinger nature comes forward. Despite his heroin withdrawal, despite the crazy circumstances where he's hearing another person in his head, and now he's in a different world with that person, and he's about to be busted, all of this, he pulls it together. And he's not getting dressed in time. And he's like, no, wait, that's okay. And Roland's like, no, what are you doing? And Eddie's like, got this. And he does. And so when they bust the door down, Eddie's sitting on the toilet with his shirt kind of open and his pants are unbuckled. And it worked perfectly. I mean, not ultimately. But in the moment, he's like, oh, I'm just taking a poop here, guys. What's your problem? So more comedy, and also seeing Eddie kind of step into that role of quick thinker, deep steel under pressure, and pulling it off, at least in this moment. It's not going to work long term because of everything that has happened. And this chapter ends with customs and security hauling Eddie off of the plane into the terminal. Wow, we did it. Whew. What do you think? I've been asking you all along, what do you think? You know what I think. I love it so much. I can't wait to do more of this book and get back with y'all here. I am looking for guests that like to talk about these things. If there's something particular in the books you want to do a little show about, I'm up for it. I even would love to have a co-host, but I understand that that's a massive undertaking of time and effort. So, but still, the door is open for conversations. But if you have anything that you would like to say or contribute, and you like chit-chatting on camera, then get in touch with me. You can comment below or send an email to realityremixradio@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you, even if you just want to talk to me. Next time, we're going to read, I think, the rest of The Prisoner up to Shuffle. But don't quote me on that. I'll tell you at the beginning. I'll put it somewhere. I think that's what we're doing, but nevertheless, come back, read some more of the book. I'll tell you what we're doing before we do it so I don't spoil anything for you. Until we meet again, my wonderful, lovely Dark Tower people, may you have long days and pleasant nights.